Guild members to a brand new episode of Breaking the Law and the 5th episode of the Final Fantasy IX Cycle of Rebirth mini-series. Having looked at a lot of elements in Final Fantasy IX over the first 4 videos, there are some beings we have talked very little about, the Eidolons. So let's dive into their mythology, how they are born, and their role in the Cycle of Rebirth. Up until 500 years before the beginning of Final Fantasy IX, the Summoners lived on the Mist Continent. Due to some architecture within Alexandria Castle, we can hypothesize that they lived in the kingdom, as the castle has an extraction circle and a platform for calling forth Eidolons. Whether they were part of the royal family is not known. That was until an experiment went wrong. A powerful summoner was able to call forth Alexander, taking its form standing over the kingdom of Alexandria. Alexander went on a rampage and must have nearly devastated the kingdom, or at least enough damage to cause the summoners to panic. It may have even attempted to attack Limblum of Bermesia in the process. To stop the giant automaton, the summoner was taken to the extraction circle below the castle and had Alexander extracted into a gem, causing it to dissipate and stay stuck in the location it was summoned. To make sure Alexander was never summoned again, its gem was broken into 4 segments, 3 of which were given to the 3 kingdoms, becoming their sacred jewels: the Silver Pendant of Alexandria, the Falcon Claw of Limblum, and the Desert Star of Bermesia that was taken by the Clarion settlers 100 years prior to the start of Final Fantasy IX. The 4th, which came to be known as the Memory Earring, was kept by the Summoners. It was at this time that the Summoners decided to leave the Mist Continent, to make sure the 4th gem fragment was never found. Heading through Fossil Rue to reach the outer continent, they were pulled to the location of where Gaia's pulse is the most focused. This is where they founded Madain Sari, allowing them to master their abilities and study their discoveries, which were documented on the Eidolon wall. As for the people of the Mist Continent, they came to forget the Summoners in time, and they became nothing more than a legend written about in books. This brings us to around 10 years before the start of Final Fantasy IX. Keeping an eye on the Summoners and their progress with summoning more and more powerful Eidolons, Garland becomes paranoid that there will be a force capable of stopping him. It is here that he has Kuja destroy Madain Sari with the Invincible, decimating the Summoners' settlement. A young girl and her mother manage to escape as Madain Sari burns to the ground, taking a boat that makes it to Alexandria. The mother unfortunately died, but the little girl survived. Dr. Tot arrives and makes an observation that she looks like Princess Garnet, who had died recently from illness. Taking her to the king, he has her Summoner's horn removed, causing the girl great pain. But from this point, she was raised by the king and Queen Bran as Princess Garnet. Even without her Summoner's horn, Princess Garnet is still able to call forth her Eidolons, but we do not know how many times she was able to do this in her young age, with no memory of her past or training as a summoner. This leads us into the beginning of Final Fantasy IX. When we start a new game, we are greeted by a scene of Garnet escaping Madain Sari with her mother during the Invincible's assault. Obviously at this point we have no idea what this means, but it then cuts to Princess Garnet sat in Alexandria on the day that the theatre ship is coming to the kingdom. At this point we have no knowledge of Eidolons or the effect they have had on the world over thousands of years. We just know that Princess Garnet wishes to escape to Limblum with the Silver Pendant, having fears about Queen Bran's erratic behaviour as of late, and wants Regent Cid to help her. It is not until Queen Bran attacks the escaping theatre ship that we learn Garnet is capable of using summon magic. We see that she has 5 Eidolons at her disposal: Shiva, Ifrit, Atomos, Odin and Bahamut, but they cost a ridiculous amount of MP to conjure. Unless you do intense training, it is doubtful that you'll be using these for a very long time, and even then it would probably just be Shiva. After the events of Limblum, we learn that Alexandria has attacked Bermesia. Garnet is told to stay in Limblum, but feels that she is being treated like a prisoner when all she wanted to do was help. She decides to leave and discover what her mother is planning, leading her on adventures through Southgate and into Trino, reuniting her with her tutor, Dr. Tot. With his help, they venture through the restored Gargan Rue and use the Gargants to reach Alexandria, where Garnet, Steiner and Marcus, who is with them to help Blank, are captured. Garnet is taken to her mother while the others are imprisoned. Queen Bran tries to convince Garnet that she has done no wrong, and that the Bermesians were getting ready to attack Alexandria. Garnet can either believe her or not, but the outcome is the same. Kuja arrives and puts her to sleep, so that Zorn and Thorn can extract her Eidolons, something that Kuja had promised to Bran to push her greed and conquest. Garnet is taken to the extraction circle beneath Alexandria, where 500 years ago, Alexander was extracted from the Summoner. Now that she is 16, it is safe for her Eidolons to be extracted, and all 5 are forcibly removed. Elsewhere, Zidane and the others awaken in Bermesia after being defeated by Beatrix. They venture through the sandstorm and up the trunk of the giant tree to the settlement of Clara. Believing they are safe, the Bermesians and Clarans join together for the first time in 100 years to perform the sacred dance and strengthen the sandstorm, which is all in vain as it disappears, leaving the giant tree completely exposed. Zidane and the others venture back down the trunk where they are ambushed by Alexandrian troops. Realizing their folly, they head back up to Clara to see it being overrun by black mages teleporting directly from above. They try to save as many people as possible and work out their plan of attack until Beatrix arrives to steal the Desert Star. The party gives chase and loses again. Beatrix flees by using the black mages, and Zidane, Vivi and Freya follow. Quina runs off, being left behind, and runs down the trunk. Upon the red rose flying above Clara, Queen Brahne calls forth Odin and destroys the settlement and the tree it was stood upon. Feeling pride in her accomplishment and acquiring one of the sacred jewels, she announces to Beatrix of her intent to execute Garnet for her treacherousness and stealing the silver pendant. Zidane and the others use the telepods they saw the black mages use and fly back to Alexandria, where they bump into Steiner, who had just escaped his cell with Marcus. Together, they find Garnet asleep on the extraction circle below Alexandria Castle, and try to make their escape, but Beatrix attacks them one more time following her duty, but comes to the realization of Garnet's predicament and wakes her up from her slumber. Queen Brahne arrives to stop them escaping with Garnet, but Freya, Beatrix and Steiner remain behind, allowing Zidane, Vivi and Garnet to escape, venturing further and crashing at the Pinnacle Rocks. It is here that Garnet meets Ramuh, the Eidolon of Lightning. He explains to her that it was her summoning magic that destroyed Clara, and asks her what her intentions are. Garnet explains that she feared her summoning magic, which explains why they cost so much MP to use, but she feels a piece of her is missing, and that she is not afraid anymore. She just wants to protect those she cares about. Ramuh agrees with this sentiment and tests her with finding 5 fragments of himself around Pinnacle Rock, telling the story of Joseph from Final Fantasy II. Regardless of what she chooses as her final chapter, Ramuh joins her, telling Zidane and Vivi that he had already decided to become her Eidolon, but he wanted her to be true to herself. They leave and venture towards Limblim, just in time to see Queen Brahne attack the kingdom like she did with Clara, sending in black mages and finishing the attack with an Eidolon, this time using Atomos to devastate Limblim. It is here that Zidane, Vivi and Garnet decide to follow Kuja to the outer continent to find and stop him, venturing through Q's Marsh and finding Quina to help them across to the next continent. It is not until the events following Conde Petit and Black Mage Village that we begin to see more of the Summoner and Eidolon story unfold. A small girl and her Moogle was stealing food from the dwarves and accidentally got caught on a branch. Her Moogle flies off, abandoning her, and Quina goes off to eat it due to its unusual colour. The small girl falls off the branch and is caught by Zidane. She introduces herself as Aiko from the village of Madain Sari, and they decide to take her home. Once they enter a battle, we will learn that Aiko is also a summoner like Garnet, with the ability to summon Fenrir. If the player uses either Ramuh or Fenrir in battle, Garnet or Aiko will question the other's ability to be able to call forth Eidolons. After a trek, the party arrive in Madain Sari, the village of summoners, still completely destroyed from the attack 10 years prior, where Aiko and an entourage of Moogles live. She explains that some of the summoners survived, but her parents died while she was very young, leaving her to be raised by her grandfather, who taught her the traditions and basics of summon magic before he passed. He told Aiko to remain in the village until she was 16, then she could head out into the world. Never seeing any other people before aside from the dwarves, she meets the party and is confused by their appearance and their lack of summoning horns. During this, Garnet is wandering around the destroyed village, feeling a sense of pain and nostalgia. Aiko grants her and Zidane access to the Eidolon wall, and seeing all the Eidolons painted on the wall causes her immense grief as she fears what her Eidolons are being used for and the emptiness she feels inside. It is here that the party first head to the Ether Tree. Aiko is reluctant at first because of how sacred the grounds are. It is a location where the summoners would call forth Eidolons, but due to the failure of one, they sealed the area, preventing anyone from entering. Aiko decides to join the party and unseal the way to the Ether Tree, using her summoner's horn to call to the Eidolon, giving her access to Carbuncle. As we've discussed the events of the Ether Tree in the other videos, I'm not going to cover that here, so we continue the summoner story after what happens and learn that someone has taken the memory earring from Madain Sari. The party returns to discover the jewel is gone, stolen by Lani, who they met in Fossil Rue. She kidnaps Aiko, putting her to sleep and taking her to the Eidolon Wall. Lani wants to exchange Aiko for the silver pendant that she was tasked to get for Queen Bran, but is interrupted by the arrival of Amarant. Lani escapes and Aiko gets her jewel back. She decides that she's going to come with Zidane and the others because she doesn't want to be alone anymore. That evening, as the sun sets, Garnet finds a dock underneath Madain Sari. Zidane locates her and they end up sailing out to sea, expressing that the sunlight hitting the village makes it look like it's on fire. This imagery awakens Garnet's latent memories. She remembers everything about her past, the night of the storm, that she was born and raised in Madain Sari, and how she became the princess of Alexandria. She now feels a sense of belonging, that she has found her true home with another of her kind. From here, the party return to the Ether Tree with Amarant in tow, waiting for Kuja to arrive. Seeing him fly overhead on his silver dragon, they climb the trunk and question his motives. Queen Bran turns up with her fleet, having chased Kuja to the Ether Tree in order to kill him. Thinking that she has the upper hand, she summons Bahamut to attack Kuja. Garnet, worried about her mother's safety, asks Aiko where the Eidolon was sealed and rushes off to ask for its aid, unfortunately revealing that it is Leviathan, who would kill the Alexandrians on their ships with a tidal wave. Bahamut strikes Kuja and makes him bleed. He calls forth the Invincible and uses a strange wave of energy to take control of Bahamut, who devastates the Alexandrian fleet, killing everyone, even Queen Bran, who made it to an escape pod. We then return to Alexandria, where Garnet lays a wreath on her mother's grave and receives most of her summoning gems from Dr. Tot. As she is next in line for the throne, Garnet is left in Alexandria to prepare for the coronation while the rest of the party head to Trino. Aiko and Garnet share 2 of the gems with each other and the party leave. Kuja appears in the dead of night, finally setting his final plan into motion. He calls forth Bahamut and Myrmidons to attack Alexandria, leaving the kingdom in a state of panic. After sending soldiers out to aid the townspeople and call for help, Steiner and Beatrix leave to take care of the beasts, leaving Garnet on her own. Feeling isolated and scared, she calls out to her mother and a strange light envelops her. Heavenly music begins to play as she feels she is being drawn somewhere. Any direction she is not meant to go, a light blocks her, and as she climbs the castle, the music gets louder and louder, taking her to the summoning pedestal her ancestors once used when they lived in Alexandria. While this is happening to Garnet, the others are returning to Alexandria via airship after Aiko found out that something was happening in Alexandria. Both Aiko and Garnet begin to glow, hearing each other from the vast distance. Aiko exclaims, "The summoner is being called. Alexander's judgment has come," and throws herself off the airship, landing by Garnet. Together, they pray with all their might for protection, calling forth Alexander, and are able to control it without it going on a rampage like it had 500 years before. Alexander blocks the kingdom with its angelic wings from Bahamut's assault, launching holy judgment at the Dragon King and dissipating it. But the danger still persists. Kuja calls down the Invincible like he had done before to take control of Alexander, but Garland takes control of the ship and destroys it instead so that Kuja cannot rise up against him, the resultant explosion killing thousands. In the preceding scenes, the party are found in Limblum, gathered to find a way to locate Kuja, where we come to learn that due to the constant stress that has befallen Garnet, she has lost her voice. From this time, she is unable to trance and finds it hard to focus on performing commands. However, from this point on, she can learn Eidolons from summon gems with a more realistic MP cost. From here, there isn't any development for the summoners until after Aelver and the Desert Palace. Those that escape through the Desert Palace bump into those that return from Aelver. They rush to Kuja's quarters to stop Zidane from giving him the Gullag Stone. In the process, Aiko is locked out of the room and kidnapped by Zorn and Thorn. Kuja escapes on the Hildegard and the party give chase aboard the Blue Narcissus, where they reach Estogaza. How it came to be there is unknown, but like how Aelver and Ipsen's castle are Terran structures left behind after the failed fusion, we can imagine that a structure from Terra was left inside Mount Gullag, leaving the extraction circle intact, sealed with the Gullag Stone that was left inside Aelver to protect it. Having lost Alexander, Kuja went to Mount Gullag to find more Eidolons. Unable to find any, he has Zorn and Thorn attempt to take Aiko's Eidolons as a last straw to defeat Garland. This results in failure as they believe she is too young for the extraction to work, but it turns out Mog was blocking it. With her will to protect Aiko, Mog enters trance, revealing that she is actually the Eidolon Medine and kills Zorn and Thorn before they transforms into Melta Gemini. Unfortunately, after the battle, Mog sadly disappears, leaving behind her ribbon that joined her to Aiko. The ribbon allows Aiko to learn and summon Medine, and it is a loving reminder to her of Mog's final words. I will always be with you. At 6 years old, Aiko found her chosen Eidolon. After we return to Limblum once again, Sid is transformed to his human self by his wife Hilda, who was being held captive in Mount Gullug. However, Garnet has gone missing. Zidane decides to check Alexandria. He bumps into Beatrix, who had not been seen since the attack on Alexandria and thought dead. She sends Zidane to Queen Braun's grave where Garnet is waiting, with her voice returned. Zidane hands Garnet the Garnet gemstone, giving her access to Bahamut once more. From here on, we have little to no main story development regarding the Summoners or Eidolons. Garnet and Aiko get more character development, but it is unrelated to them as Summoners, obtaining Eidolons or revisiting Madain Sari. However, you can return to Madain Sari if you wish to learn some mythology and lore, but it's completely optional. We learn what truly happened to Madain Sari once we arrive on Terra, how it was destroyed by the Invincible, and that it was Garland's paranoia that set it all in motion. But aside from this, we don't learn anything else in the main story. In the ending, we see that Garnet became queen and that Aiko was adopted by Regent Sid and Hilda, the two final summoners living happily ever after, especially once Zidane returns, finding a place to belong away from the ruins of Madain Sari. This concludes the long story and history of the summoners and their Eidolons. However, there is more to their tale. We covered the events prior to Final Fantasy IX and the main story revolving around them, but we didn't discuss how Eidolons come to be and how they are born within the world cycle of rebirth. The way that Eidolons are born into the Final Fantasy IX universe is fascinating. Like everything else, Eidolons are born from their world's crystal. However, they do not undergo the same processes of birth that other lifeforms do in the cycle of rebirth. While almost all lifeforms in Final Fantasy IX follow the same process, they are born through parentage, live their life, die, and have their soul return to the crystal, which then processes their memories to create more complex life. Eidolons are not born in the same way. Over time, tales and legends are told by people across the world of magical and supernatural beings. The more tales that are told, the more memories of them there are. So when these souls die, memories of these stories are absorbed and processed by the World Crystal, birthing these beings from the tales into existence. This is how Eidolons are created, which the World Crystal makes into its protectors. This is all explained at the Eidolon Wall in Madain Sari. By walking clockwise and anti-clockwise, hidden messages begin to appear, one of which explains how myths and legends create the Eidolons and not the other way around. The legend of Eidolons. We discovered Eidolons by researching legends documented from around the world. The thunder god Ramu is one of these legends. Some theorize that the Eidolons were created from legends and not the other way around. So from this we can theorize that stories were being told in the Limblum region about what was at Pinnacle Rock. It's possible that the stories came in the form of a hermit living in Pinnacle Rock who had powers over thunder and lightning, as we first see him in the form of an old man. Another example of this is the connection between Doguero and Leviathan. When the party is able to access the secluded library, they are able to see that the people there see Leviathan as their deity. Some mention the legend of a sea dragon god who provides them with all the water they need. After solving some puzzles, we can access a tablet engraved with Leviathan, where we can make an offering of ore and convert it into aquamarine, the gemstone of Leviathan. We see in the end of Disc 2 that Leviathan is sealed in a statue after a failed summoning, so it's possible that tales began of him in Doguero, mentioning a sea dragon god and its blessings of water, which then allowed the summoners to attempt to call it into being. We can also note from these messages that there are rumours of Eidolons that summoners don't know about. We can imagine that summoners knew of Eidolons from stories and records from the Mist Continent, but they wouldn't have had any way to determine all the stories of Eidolons from the lost and forgotten continents, except for something heavily documented like Leviathan. This information is yet to be confirmed, but there is an eyewitness account to a previously undiscovered Eidolon. It was witnessed in Estogaza. If there is an Eidolon that could exist outside of our legends, our theory would no longer hold true, but maybe there are other tribes that have legends of their own. So at first thought, the summoners believed that only known legends could be created into Eidolons. However, any legend can become one that passes through the crystal, which threw the summoners' theory into question. It is possible that the mole people who lived in Mount Gullug had their own god that was born into an Eidolon, But when the mole people disappeared or went extinct, no more memories of this Eidolon existed and it ceased to be, which adds more as to why there is an extraction circle inside Mount Gullug. Interestingly, one of the messages on the Eidolon wall confirms their theory to be true. When they have all been unlocked, a special message can be seen for Aiko, stating that they wanted to create memories of an Eidolon who was both friend and protector of humans, leading to the creation of Medine, who became the protector and friend of Aiko in the form of Mog. Aiko, you are a treasure born to a dying village. We are dying and there is little we can do for you. We shall return to the stars with one wish in mind. If legends are not born of Eidolons, and Eidolons but born out of legends, let us leave this place with one wish. If we can give birth to a legend, it shall create an Eidolon that is friend and protector of humans. Her parents' final wish, birthing a legend into being and allowing Aiko to eventually summon Medine. Now that we have an understanding that different areas of Gaia told varying tales, resulting in the potential of multiple Eidolons that weren't known to the Summoners, we can look at Eidolon evolution. This can be seen with the first Eidolon discovered, Ch.5. We can find an entry that states Ch.5 once took the form of a young girl. But if Garnet summons her, she takes the form of an adult, which this message also references. The first Eidolon discovered, Ch.5. Ch.5 took the form of a young girl when she was first discovered. She now appears as a grown woman. Eidolons adapt their forms to the time and culture in which they appear. Ch.5 illustrates this theory. From this, we can see that the Summoners hypothesize that Eidolons change depending on the time period and the cultural impacts at the time, which is an interesting deduction as we know they are born from memories. So even the Eidolons that are already born can be influenced by the tales and legends as they change over time, resulting in evolution of Eidolons. Which brings us back to Ramuh. As I mentioned the possible influences to his origins, we can consider this eventually led people to believe that Ramuh was a thunder god, causing him to change from his hermit form into the one we see when Garnet summons him. Or it is possible that other stories were told of Ramuh by others from around the world, causing his evolution. To add on to this, another passage from the same message explains how Ch.5 has appeared as a fairy in different locations around Gaia, sparking the rise to the theory of how myths and legends varied throughout Gaia caused the changes to the Eidolons. This is similar to how deities and mythological creatures appear throughout our history and vary depending on location, such as Zeus from Greek mythology and Jupiter from Roman mythology. In certain areas, Ch.5 is depicted as a snow fairy. This cannot be verified since the only written document that remains is in the Summoner village. People associate Ch.5 with the snow fairy. Why she changes form remains a mystery. One possible final Eidolon evolution calls back to Leviathan. We know that the Summoners attempted to call forth Leviathan at the Ether Tree, but they did not succeed, erecting a statue in the place where the summoning failed. Now if we compare Leviathan's appearance and the statue to the tablet in Deguero, we can see some differences. It can be hard to make out as we can't get a full look at it, but some things that are noticeable are how its face is different to that of the Eidolon, which has more of an elongated mouth that goes into a point, as well as the summonable Leviathan having two large points extruding from its head, while the image shows a set of multiple smaller spines on the side of its head. There also appears to be dorsal fin-like appendages across its back that the summonable Leviathan does not have. And of course, the most notable difference, the image in Deguero does not have the large wing-like fins that are a key feature in the summon's design, giving Leviathan its unique appearance that even the statue variant shows in energy form when Garnet prays to it. The legends that come from Deguero also make note that Leviathan is a deity that brings fresh and clean water. But what we learn at the Ether Tree is that it is an Eidolon of destruction, causing tidal waves to wipe out its enemies. This may show some form of Eidolon evolution, or how multiple legends show different forms of the same being, like that of Ch.5 being a woman and a fairy. Leviathan may have originated as a legend in Deguero, but a tale could have also been told by sailors about a huge winged serpent that causes tidal waves, causing a change to Leviathan's appearance that the Summoners learned about, and the crystal birthed it into being, making Leviathan evolve. I also mentioned briefly in the text back in the second video about how Gizamuluk could be an Eidolon, based on how the Burmesians revere it, and how it became their protectors, keeping their enemies at bay, while also being used to oversee wedding ceremonies. What I didn't mention is how this could be another possible legend of Leviathan. While they are not identical by any means, Gizamuluk's serpentine body, wing-like fins, and its head may have influenced tales of Leviathan, but to the Burmesians, it was not called Leviathan, but it was birthed into the world as yet another form of it, as it appears to have existed for hundreds of years within its grotto. This may have influenced the crystal's memories of Leviathan and evolved it to match both Emperor Gizamuluk and the Daguerreo tales, resulting in different stories influencing the Eidolon's appearance based on two sets of cultural impacts, just like Shiva has changed over the years. While the Summoners can feel the ebb and flow of the planet, the Gaians are still an early civilization, so they would not have discovered their own crystal and would have no understanding on the implications of the Eidolons' changes. But we can see across these hidden messages that Eidolons are heavily influenced by the legends that created them, causing them to evolve over time. This adds to the message that they are protectors of their respective worlds. We don't know much about Gaia before Terra's failed fusion attempt that almost destroyed it, other than what was spoken about in Memoria. What we can speculate from the knowledge that we do have is that millions of souls will have died in the failed fusion, so much so that Garland had to plant the ether tree on Gaia to stabilise the planet and allow life to thrive once more. All those souls would have returned to the crystal, millions of them being processed at once, causing all their tales, myths and legends to pass through the crystal. Feeling vulnerable, the Gaian crystal may have begun to birth Eidolons from these tales in order to protect itself, but due to the lack of summoners to be able to call them, Garland didn't see them as much as a threat at the time. We see with Ramuh that Eidolons are capable of existing without a summoner to call them. They are free to exist between their realm and the realm of life. Summoners are just able to commune with them with their horns to seek their aid, but anyone who holds their essence can summon them. Before the Cataclysm, the Gaians would have seen Terra inching closer, affecting their world in horrific ways, and this may have sparked new tales of destruction, one of which we may see in the form of Fenrir. Many of you know of Fenrir, but just in case I'll give you a quick rundown of what it is. In Norse mythology, Fenrir is the son of Loki and Angrboda. Taking the form of a wolf, he is chained, gagged with a sword and bound to a rock, destined to be chained to it until the day of Ragnarok, the Norse version of Doomsday. On that day he will be released, devour the sun and battle against the god Odin and kill him. Now in terms of Final Fantasy IX, it is possible that as Terra came closer, it blocked out the sun, and wolf-like creatures became very active, linking to the possible creation of Fenrir. Adding on to this, if you equip Ico with the Maiden's Prayer, Fenrir's attack is changed to Millennial Decay, possibly signifying the initial destruction of Gaia, similar to Ragnarok in Norse mythology. At that time, Fenrir may have been created, but as Gaia rebuilt and life began to thrive, Fenrir may have been seen as the wolf causing the shifting of winds and earth as Gaia stabilised and life grew, evolving into what we see when Ico summons it, a relationship between Fenrir and Titan using the move Terrestrial Rage, which may signify the chaos of Gaia after this time. While in mythology, Fenrir was associated with cataclysms of the skies and earth. Eidolons aren't just a Gaian creation either. They appear to be able to form on worlds wherever there is a crystal. Terra would have had its own set of Eidolons, but during the collapse they began to disappear. With no new memories being returned to its crystal, it is incapable of producing Eidolons. However, we do meet one of their Eidolons in the story, Ark. Unlike the rest of the Eidolons in the game, Ark is a Terran Eidolon. You first encounter it in Aelver as a mysterious ship with a draconic motif, but it isn't until much later that you learn that it is an Eidolon. After its battle, you receive a pumice piece as a reward that teaches boost to Garnet and Ico. The other piece is located in a chocograph treasure, which can be then synthesized by Hades in Memoria. Ozma also drops a complete pumice after it is defeated. When Ark is summoned, it uses the move Eternal Darkness. We are zoomed out into space where Ark flies from the red moon that once orbited Terra, before the failed fusion. It changes from its ship form into a humanoid robotic form, not too dissimilar to a transformer. It lasers the ground with a Terran symbol and rains down fire from its shoulder turret, before charging up the blade on its back and launching a world-ending laser that blasts back out into space. As we know very little information about Ark, other than that it is a Terran Eidolon, we can theorise how it came into existence, based on the knowledge of an Eidolon's birth and the history of Terra. When Zidane and the party are sent to Aelver, we learn that Terra was an advanced civilization. They were trying to create the ultimate warship and went through numerous designs until the creation of the Invincible. During this period, flora and fauna will have begun to die as Terra's crystal grew weaker. The Terrans tried everything to stop the death of their world once the decline began, and it is here that they started assimilating the crystals of other worlds to help it survive. Flora and fauna began to thrive once more, but Terra was still declining. This is when the Terrans created Gaian and tried to fuse their world with Gaia. Gaia's crystal rejected the process and the Terrans' plan failed, leaving some of their important buildings on Gaia's surface. In an attempt to prevent any further decline, the Terrans put their spirits into a sleep-like status in Pandemonium to stop any more souls and memories being sorted by its crystal. Now imagine the fear and hopelessness that the Terrans must have felt during this time, resorting to drastic measures to keep their world alive. Stories may have been told about a ship that would take the Terrans from their world, a literal ark, to save them from their plight, while other stories about a warship with devastating weapons that would protect their planet and its history may have been told. And due to the waning power of Terra's crystal, they were fused into one Eidolon with the power of a ship and a war machine. After the Terrans went into stasis, no more Eidolons were born, but Ark remained, protecting the history of Terra inside Aelver, which was left on Gaia after the failed fusion attempt, where it remained until Zidane and the others defeated it to get the Gulag Stone. With this information in mind, I want to talk about 4 Terran beings that may fit the role of Eidolon that aren't confirmed, but they may have once filled this role. When we retrieve the mirrors from Ibsen's castle and send each of the teams to the 4 elemental shrines, we are introduced to the Guardians of Terra. As we saw in episode 2 of this miniseries, they didn't show the Water Guardian in game, but there is artwork of it. Now interestingly, these beings have been on Gaia for 5,000 years. We know that no more souls went through Terra's crystal once they began merging with other worlds, so that they could stop the decline in its tracks. Once the Terran souls were in stasis and the failed fusion occurred, the Guardians were left on Gaia, sealed within their shrines. The same thing happened with Ark and Aelver. While it is never explicitly stated that the Guardians are Eidolons, we can imagine that they were created from memories during the decline to keep the 4 prime elements safe. They are never mentioned to have been created by Garland, so they would have had to come from memories to birth them into being. During the cutscenes that precede the battle with the Earth Guardian, we learn that they are the Guardians of Terra, filled with the power of Terra itself. This could be seen as them essentially revealing they are Eidolons. As we know, Eidolons are born of their world crystal from myths and legends to be defenders of their planet, or Guardians, filled with the power of their world crystal to fulfill their duty. The Fire Guardian says, "We did not become Guardians to chat with mortals." As is our understanding, Eidolons have an extremely long life, or they are immortal. We know that with Ark he was sealed inside Aelver for 5,000 years, and that Alexander has been around for 500 years minimum, along with many tales of different Eidolons from around Gaia, showing their immortality or extended lifespan. And we also know that some Eidolons have the ability to speak, like we see with Ramuh and Medine. It is possible that they are stated to be immortal because of the fusion magic of the Terrans, but it seems like a likely possibility that they were once Terran Eidolons, doing the task that they were born for and protecting Terra, as its world crystal would have birthed them for. Which brings us back to the concept of Eidolon evolution. We know with Shiva that Eidolons have the ability to change form over time. This concept can be applied to the 4 Guardians. Once we reach Memoria, we are forced to battle evolved forms of the Guardians that reveal themselves as the 4 fiends we see in Final Fantasy I, each with memories of their past, at least with what we see with Malarith, who says, "We meet again," recognizing the party from their previous encounter at the shrines. The difference in their design could be seen as a form of Eidolon evolution. However, this isn't something that occurs over a vast period of time. Kuja is able to manipulate the crystal into birthing these new forms into being, rather than many myths and legends altering their forms based on the cultural impacts of the time, which hints to them not being Eidolons but something new entirely. However, based on their supposed immortality, their original purpose and how they were filled with Terra's energy, we can theorize how these beings could have been Eidolons, birthed to protect Terra just as the Gaian Eidolons were over the last 5,000 years. This theory could also apply to Tahaka, but as the links to death guys are just hypothetical, I didn't think it had any weight in the argument of whether the Guardians are Eidolons or not. But based on their history and purpose, we can see how they could be Eidolons born to protect Terra. Now there's one more theory I want to go into. With multiple confirmed locations from Terra being transferred to Gaia, there is one more Eidolon that may have come from Terra, one that you wouldn't expect that has ties to Ibsen's castle. Odin. Odin is an Eidolon familiar to Final Fantasy fans, based on the god from Norse mythology. He cuts down those who stand against his conjurer with his signature ability, Zantetsuken, while riding the six-legged Sleipnir. He appears in the majority of its titles as one of the game's summons. As I mentioned in the story segment of the video, we see early on that Garnet has access to using Odin, but like all of her other Eidolons, she fears their power and she can't use him. Queen Braun uses him to decimate Clara, and it's not until Disc 3 that we are able to get a piece of dark matter from the Trino auction house so that Garnet can learn to summon Odin once more. Along with Garnet being able to summon him, we see Odin painted on the Eidolon wall, so we know he is established in Gaia's history and mythos. However, after the events of Ibsen's castle, we can return to it to find a secret chamber emblazoned with Odin's sword. At its base are two pots that must be moved anti-clockwise to fight the flow of time. Energy from the sword is imbued into one of these pots, and the party receives the Ancient Aroma, an accessory that teaches Garnet Odin's sword, where instead of instant death, he deals damage instead. But why is a Gaian Eidolon tied directly to a Terran structure? We know that during the failed fusion, Ibsen's castle was left upside down on Gaia's surface, resulting in everything becoming reversed. On Terra, this castle would have had the sword chamber at the top, possibly making it a place of religious significance where the Terrans would make offerings to the sword that became the Ancient Aroma. As we only know one true Terran Eidolon, it is easily distinguishable as being completely artificial, whereas the Gaian Eidolons all have some level of being biological, including Alexander and Atomos. This just adds to Terra being an advanced civilization, so the stories told would have had a level of sci-fi to them. But this doesn't explain Odin and his sword in a Terran castle. The difference between Ark and Odin comes from their transference. Ark was left inside Elver for 5,000 years, a location that can only be opened by a Terran. No one would have been able to find it, to tell tales of it and have it evolve from Gaia's crystal. Whereas Ibsen's castle was completely open, any explorer could have found Odin there, or the chamber containing his sword, and tales began to be told of him. We know that at least one explorer did find it, Ibsen, which is how Lady Hilda comes up with the name for the castle. Ibsen is mentioned throughout Final Fantasy IX as someone with fantastical stories, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that he found Odin there, and his tale has caused Gaia to birth Odin into existence as word and memory spread. The other possibility is that Odin did not exist on Terra, and the sword belonged to another being of death that the Terrans worshipped. Then when explorers found Ibsen's castle, they discovered the sword and began to create tales and theories as to who it belonged to, resulting in the creation of Odin. This gives Odin a unique take within the cycle of Rebirth, as it is possible he completely converted from Terran origin to Gaian origin, which is kind of like what Terra is trying to do to Gaia. The changing of tales around the world allowed Eidolons to be born and evolve as time passes on, making the Eidolons a very unique case in the cycle of Rebirth, as they are born from memories and alter because of these memories. They never pass through the crystal, which leaves us with the question, what happens to an Eidolon that no one remembers? While visiting the Chocobo Air Garden, we are able to find an Eidolon cave. Inside, we find a swirling mass of positive and negative energy with the name Ozma. Ozma is one of the secret bosses of the game that has very little information on it. All we know is that it was sealed within an Eidolon cave, and the friendly creatures of the world have some knowledge about it, with the friendly Yan saying, "Now you can reach the round guy." There are many theories as to what Ozma actually is, and all of them link within the life cycle of worlds in Final Fantasy IX universe, and how Eidolons are born within the world. During the events of Disc 2, Aiko explains to the party that when an Eidolon is failed to be summoned, they will seal it within a location the failure occurred. This happens with Leviathan at the Ether Tree, where it was sealed inside a statue. This may have been the same with Ozma. Not much is known about the Chocobo Air Garden other than Ch.5 was able to find it with his own Chocobo according to the 6 chocograph pieces. It can be theorised that it ended up in the sky during the failed fusion attempt. As Terra disappeared inside the devastated Gaia, the impact may have forced some line up into the sky, which was kept up by the gravitational pull of the 2 moons that now orbited the planet. This will have left Ozma sealed up in its Eidolon cave, completely forgotten about, causing it to lose all of its consciousness. We can see with Leviathan that even though it was failed to be summoned, the statue built was still in the shape of a sea serpent. The Eidolon cave appears more like a cairn, so it's possible that before the destruction of Gaia, the summoners of that era remembered Eidolons by the use of cairns as a form of symbolism. Interestingly, Ozma is considered a bird enemy, as bird killer does increase damage to it, which could possibly hint at its original form. Legends of a bird-like being could have been passed down, resulting in the crystal birthing it into being when enough souls passed through, but when the summoners failed to call it, they sealed it in the Eidolon cave. Then when Gaia was destroyed, it was sent up into the sky and no more memories of Ozma will have passed through the crystal to keep its form intact. Unlike the rest of the summons whose stories were told over time, allowing them to evolve and take on form of the time period. The bird theming also adds to the fact you can only access it by Chocobo, and it leads back to the Chocobo's paradise. Another theory as to why Ozma could not retain its original form links back to Ark. Every Eidolon has something they're attached to, that their energies resonate with. This is usually a gem of some form, but it's not always the case. When you battle Ozma, you receive a pumice as a reward. As mentioned earlier, you receive a pumice piece from the battle with Ark, while the other is from a chocograph treasure, only being able to synthesize them in Hades' secret shop to create a complete pumice, while a complete pumice is obtained from Ozma. What this might mean is that Ozma was originally the Gaian Eidolon linked to pumice, and when the worlds failed to fuse and Ark was left behind on Gaia, the power of it became attributed to pumice in Ozma's place, causing it to lose its form due to it being in a weakened state, while Ark was able to retain its form because it was sealed away for thousands of years untouched by memories. It was also called into the world, while Ozma wasn't. The pumice we receive is like how Garnet obtained the aquamarine from Leviathan, but we know that Ark is learned from pumice, so Ozma may have been replaced in this instance, and the more powerful Eidolon won. Ozma is a special case within the rebirth cycle and lore of the Eidolons, because if one of these theories is true, Ozma exists but does not exist at the same time, making it a contradiction on everything else within the Final Fantasy IX universe, because if no memories of it have passed through the crystal for thousands of years, then it should cease to exist. But we do know that Ch.5 went there and possibly encountered Ozma, keeping its swirling vortex form alive in a state of flux, while Ark was able to remain the same due to the halt of Terra's crystal's functions, keeping its form intact for 5,000 years while replacing Ozma as the Eidolon of pumice. Now we've covered the story and history of the Eidolons and how Eidolons are born and evolve, we can talk about their inclusion in the Wheel of Life, where they would be placed in Samsara. One of the realms in Samsara is the home of the Ashura, or demigods. This is one of the heavenly realms that a soul can attain, however it is a place that has a potential for both good and evil, similar to that of the human realm. The demigods are blessed with incredible power, but they are fierce and quarrelsome beings, often causing conflict and suffering with anger and jealousy. There are multiple interpretations of this, but one suggests that the Tree of Life grows in this realm, but its fruits fall into the realm of the gods. This is part of what causes the demigods' envious nature. They openly start war with the gods, where the fruit of the Tree of Life falls. They also cause trouble for the human realm in the form of natural disasters and illness. Eidolons fit into this realm of the demigods, as they are beings with incredible power, but are not enough to attain the true power of a god, even if they are worshipped as such on Gaia. While they may not seem to be jealous and angry beings, we can see a literal interpretation of their nature through the acts of their summoners. Eidolons are summoned to fulfill the will of their master, usually coming in the form of protection for the one who called them, which we can see with Garnet and Aiko. However, this isn't the case with other wielders. We know that a prideful, arrogant summoner called forth Alexander. They say Alexander went on a rampage during this time due to him being the most powerful Eidolon ever summoned. But there may have been some form of the arrogance that Alexander felt in that moment thanks to the summoner. However, he was too much for one summoner to handle. The summoners even mentioned this in the writings upon the Eidolon wall. When the arrogant one summoned a power that could not be controlled, holy judgment was passed. The jewel of this village must serve as a reminder of the day we had to leave our country. Queen Brand forcefully has Garnet's Eidolons extracted to fulfill her ambitions. She uses their power to cause conflict with her selfish, greedy and arrogant ambitions. Using the power of Odin, Atomos and Bahamut to get what she wants, thinking she's untouchable. Even Kuja seeks powerful Eidolons in order to take down Gaian, attempting to use the Eidolons for his own selfish ideals, to obtain as much power as possible and defeat a godlike being within the game. The summoners mention that the Eidolons are not inherently evil, it is down to the one who calls them. Fear not the power of summon magic, but the one who uses it. Greed and instability endlessly repeat old mistakes. Will omniscience set us free? This all culminates to them having a similar state to the demigod realm on the Wheel of Life. They may be born of stories, but they are influenced and used by the actions of the selfish and arrogant people throughout history, and in a way with Garnet and Aiko, they are used to combat the gods. We can even see parallels to the Tree of Life being planted in their realm. The summoners chose Madain Sari due to its proximity to the flow of Gaia's life force, where the Ether Tree is also planted that is watched down upon by Gaian in Pandemonium, altering the fruits of Gaia for his own personal gain. This mimics the way that the Tree of Life grows in the demigods realm and breaches into the god realm. So this leaves the Eidolons to represent the demigods on the Wheel of Life, being granted incredible power that can be used in a negative way that influences the Eidolons' thoughts and feelings to do their master's bidding. And with that, we have come to an end of the Eidolon video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. We have one more video left in this mini-series covering the beings of life and death and their relevance to Samsara, and I hope to see you there.